Baldur's Gate 3 has some of the coolest and most powerful spells to choose from, but some are significantly more powerful than others. In this video, I'm going to be showing you the most overpowered spells in all of Baldur's Gate 3, so let's get started. Starting this off, Silence is one of those spells that you can acquire fairly early at level 2, and it tends to be massively overlooked. I really started to take notice of this spell late Act 2, but early on, this spell is actually extremely powerful. Silence is a concentration spell that creates a huge area where no one can cast a single spell. This means most mage or hybrid casters simply can't use their kit while inside. On top of this spell forces movement. Not many spells in Baldur's Gate completely stop many classes from playing and force movement built into one spell. So it comes as no surprise that Silence is on this list, and honestly it is criminally underrated. While we're on the subject of force movement, Command has to make this list. Now, Command is a spell that can do multiple things like force enemies to run away, possibly setting up for attack of opportunity, or making them approach, which does a very similar thing. It can even make them drop their weapons to disarm your opponent, which is insanely strong. This is how you get Commander Zulk to drop his greatsword and the Nautilus ship to get the Everburn blade. The spell is extremely versatile and is one of the most powerful skills in the game, and the icing on the cake is you get it relatively early. Shifting gears here a bit and going to more offensive spells, Fireball is one of the best area of effect spells in all of Baldur's Gate. The game offers you a mountain of AoE skills, but Fireball is by far my favorite. When you spec your character correctly, you can use spells without harming your allies, and compared to other spells like ice-based spells which can trip your allies, Fireball can set the area ablaze without any harm. Plus, the spell looks so cool and it feels pretty damn satisfying. Now, damage and control aren't everyone's cup of tea, and some prefer stealth, and that's where Fog comes into play. Fog heavily obscures things within and blinds all things inside. This spell basically allows you to play completely different compared to many other ways, and it can actually help cover your tracks should you want to use it. Speaking of covering your tracks, Haste is another spell worth mentioning. It is a level 3 transmutation spell that gives you plethora of effects. You gain an extra action, more movement, and you deal more damage. All of these things are pretty useful for pretty much any class regardless of how you play. And if you play a class like the monk, for example, adding an additional bonus action can give you up to 11 attacks in the right situation and make you move around the battlefield as you please. For a level 3 spell, Haste is a pretty powerful spell, and you don't even have to learn it, which is the great thing, because if you get the Darkfire shortbow, it has it built in, which is pretty amazing. Slowing things down a bit, we have the spell called Slow. Now let's go over what Slow actually does. In it, half movement speed, reduces armor class and dexterity saving throws by 2, prevent taking reaction, allows taking only an action or a bonus action, but not both, and limits making only one attack per turn, and in some cases it might even delay spellcasting for a turn. That is quite a bit for a singular spell, and keep in mind that this effect can be used on up to 6 enemies. I've only had this effect be used on me one time, and to be quite frank, the fight went from what I thought would be a very easy fight to a complete standstill, which I would compare to big boss encounters. Used correctly, Slow really slows things down. Misty Step is another one of those spells that really benefit your team, and personally, every single character I play with, including teammates, has Misty Step on their bar in some capacity. Movement is one of the most important things in Baldur's Gate 3. Misty Step provides instantaneous movement with only requiring you to use a bonus action. This means you can attack and move if needed, and honestly, on most if not all classes, Misty Step almost feels mandatory, and since there's multiple ways to acquire it, I don't really see why you wouldn't get this spell. Taking a step back, early on you get access to arguably one of the most powerful spells in the game, and when I say early on, I mean within 10 minutes, and the spell is called Bless. This spell isn't only obtainable by Shadowheart, she is a cleric after all, but if you do play a paladin, you get access to this spell too, and what it does, it gives you a +1 d4 bonus to attack rolls and saving throws for 10 turns for up to 3 allies. Now for players who don't really understand this, what this basically means is basically you're more likely to hit opponents and you're less likely to have certain effects be successful against you. Bless, in my opinion, is one of those must-have spells in your party, as it makes hitting more consistent, especially in the early game where every attack really counts and is pretty limited. For me, I have Shadowheart in all of my parties because, to be quite frank, I'm a massive fan of her voice actor, Jennifer English. Now besides her amazing work as the voiceover, Shadowheart is a cleric, and cleric has access to one of my favorite skills, and that is Spirit Guardians. It's another one of those spells that not only deal area of effect damage, which believe it or not isn't that common at level 3 for a cleric, but also allows you to choose between radiant or necrotic damage while cutting the movement speed of enemies in half. Now from a gameplay perspective, the spell shines when you want to make your fairly tanky cleric actually deal some damage, and since it offers so much, it would be criminal not to recommend it, since you very likely will have Shadowheart in your party through the entire game. Bless and Spirit Guardians are both light focused spells, and in order for there to be light, there must be darkness, and well, luckily, that's a spell in this game as well. Very similar to Fog, Darkness does pretty much the same thing, but with a massive benefit. Of course, you're heavily obscured within it, and creatures within are blinded, but what makes Darkness a much better Fog is the fact that creatures can't make a ranged attack in or out from the darkness. What this means is you can safely fight within the darkness. This is more useful for classes that can see in the dark, without having to fear anything shooting you from range. Now, you didn't hear this from me, but Darkness is one of those funny spells in Baldur's Gate 3 that weirdly breaks the AI, and honestly, it's hilarious what you can get away with when you use Darkness. Now, these are the spells I love in Baldur's Gate 3, and at the very least, I would encourage you to add them to your character, as their effects are extremely powerful. Now, not everyone enjoys the spellcaster playstyle, but on screen now, I do have a fighter paladin that, while very melee focused, take advantage of some of these spells that we saw here today, so I encourage you to check it out as well.